The second reason, I think, put even more pressure on food companies, and that was the beginning of what we in the United States called the shareholder value movement, which was a movement of stockholders to get higher and more immediate returns on investment. And this was a movement attributed to a speech given by Jack Welch, who was the head of General Electric at that time, in which he said, never mind all this blue chip stock business where people get long-term returns on investments, we want more money now. And this put pressure on food corporations especially to produce higher returns on investment in a situation in which there was already twice as much food available as anybody needed. And the result was that food corporations, actually all corporations have to do this, but for food corporations in particular, the pressure to produce immediate returns and to report growth to Wall Street every 90 days put phenomenal pressure on food companies to change the food environment in order to encourage people to eat more. And the way food companies did this was in ways that changed society, in ways that most people didn't even notice because we were living through it, and now everybody takes it for granted. The cheap food enabled people to eat outside the home more, and in the next series of slides, every one of these that has an exclamation point is a point in which research demonstrates that people eat more calories under those circumstances. So if you eat outside the home, you will eat more calories than you do if you prepare your food at home. If you eat larger portions, you will eat more calories. And this slide shows the rise. The red line is what you've already seen. It's the rise in calories in the food supply from the 1980s to the present. The blue lines are work of my former doctoral student, now Dr. Lisa Young, who measured the introduction of large-sized portions into the American food supply, and they exactly track. I don't think you need to go beyond large portions to explain rising rates of obesity. So here's Lisa Young with an example of what has happened to food in the food supply. The white cup on the left is an 8-ounce standard serving size for a soft drink. It holds 100 calories worth of soft drink. The one on the right is a double gulp that you bought at a local movie theater. If it's not too full of ice, it holds 64 ounces and provides 800 calories. And the research shows that that is consumed by one person. So large portions are a major factor in the rise in calorie intake, and they've changed society. Here's another one, ubiquity. I like to ask the question, when did it become all right to eat in bookstores? Certainly 20 years ago, it was not all right to eat in bookstores, and now bookstores have cafes, as do libraries in the United States. Another is proximity. The closer food is to you, the more of it you will eat. And that's why nutritionists in the States are so worried about vending machines in schools, because the more vending machines that are available, the more food people eat out of them. And then low prices for as long as they last. In the States, you can go to McDonald's and buy 5 hamburgers for $1 a piece if you've got $5, or 1 salad, and the same kind of ratio operates here. This is about farm policy. It's about agricultural policy intervening in the way we eat. Now, these were the kinds of issues that I discussed in my books that came out in the early 2000s, and as I was going around the country giving speeches like this, people would come up afterwards and say, well, yeah, this politics stuff is interesting, but you didn't tell us what to eat. And I was kind of surprised by that, because no, these books weren't about what to eat. But people told me that they had a lot of trouble figuring out what to eat, and that they saw supermarkets as sort of ground zero for their anxieties about food choices. And that when they went to supermarkets, they just saw danger absolutely everywhere. They found supermarkets terrifying places. They were completely bewildered by the choices that they had to make. There were just so many choices, and what they really wanted was for somebody just simply to tell them what to eat and what not to eat. So I thought I could do that. So I spent a year going around supermarkets and doing a very close analytical look at the foods that were in supermarkets, and ended up writing this book, What to Eat, which discusses all of the issues that people need to be concerned about, from health to sustainability in making food choices. It was a full year of research to do it, and I can understand why consumers are confused because the issues were complicated. The first thing that I discovered was that supermarkets run on rules, and I won't go through all of the rules, except to say that there is nothing in a supermarket that is accidental. It is governed by rule number 1, which is the more products that you see in a market, the more you buy. And so the entire setup of the store is set up to make you see as many products as possible. That's why there are all these long aisles in big supermarkets, and it's why the dairy products are always in the far back corner, I think even here, to try to get you to see as many products as you possibly can while you're walking through. Rule number 2 is you put the highest profit items in the place where they can be most easily seen, because the whole point is to get you to see as much as possible. So you put the most profitable ones where they're most visible at eye level and at the ends of the aisles, and in the States at the cash registers. And that brings me to the whole question of the center aisles, which is where the junk foods are. And I'm a nutritionist, and we're not supposed to call them junk foods. We're supposed to call them foods of minimal nutritional value. But you all know what they are. They're foods that are high in calories, they're highly processed, they're usually depleted in nutrients, and they're extremely profitable for everybody concerned. So there's a big push to sell a lot of them. And in fact, junk foods is such a common term that in a supermarket near Los Angeles, where my son lives, there's actually a sign over the aisle that calls it exactly what it is. And that brings me to rule number 3, which is you put as much sugar into foods as you can, and roughly a quarter of the products in American supermarkets are very, very heavily sugared. And we're not talking about just the kind of sugar that comes in boxes. We're talking about soft drinks, which are sold in many, many places in the store and are extremely profitable for everybody concerned. And the pricing strategy, excuse me, the pricing strategy on soft drinks is kind of interesting. If you buy the great big 2-liter bottle of a soft drink, it costs less than 3 cents per ounce. But if you buy the smaller 8-ounce cans, they're more than 10 cents per ounce. And I asked supermarket executives why the price spread was so great on those size portions. And they said, well, if people want smaller portions, they ought to be willing to pay for them. So these were the kinds of things that Michelle Simon, a colleague called Michelle Simon, who wrote a book called Appetite for Profit, which is a guidebook on how to fight the food industry, and set up this kind of diagram of explaining the enormous pressures that are on food companies these days, pressures from advocates, from regulators, from lawsuits, and most of all from Wall Street, to try to be more accommodating to social concerns about obesity and about sustainability. And the food companies, when the obesity business first hit, went through all of the stages of grief. They started out with by doing nothing, by denial, and now they're taking a great deal of action to appear to be extremely accommodating to these social concerns, and I'll talk about some of the ways they're doing that.